Hey guys. Okay, I don't look, amazingly professional right now because I'm recording this really fast after school just so that you have something to look at, because I feel like we kind of glossed over this in our notes because I kind of changed which notes I was using this year. So I just wanted to make sure, because this is the one that I'm really worried about. So and we're going to talk about this when we get back as well. But I just wanted to upload something tonight for those of you who will study over the weekend, so you have this ahead of time. We need to know 3 vocabulary words when it comes to chemical equations. First is, and you're going to see my horrible writing on the computer screen handwriting. It's not actually too bad. These are called reactants in the middle here. Or I'm sorry, on the left here, not the middle. And then in the middle here, I'm going to change colors. We can use the word yield. This is in the booklet. It's going to yield this, or that's what you're going to get. If you've ever made like a cookie recipe that says the yield is 2 dozen cookies or whatever, this means it's going to yield. And then these are products. I'm using the photosynthesis equation just to have something. But reactants are what I start with. They react. Then we're going to say that symbol in the middle is the yield symbol. And that just means like the reaction is happening. So in the case of photosynthesis, it's happening with sunlight. In the case of a lot of reactions, it's happening with heat. In the case of, we saw if you did a side quest about rust, in the case of rust, it means with water, right? And that yield can't happen unless you have water present, even though water is not necessarily like a reactant. Okay, and then products, here in this case, we have sugar and oxygen because it's photosynthesis, but products are on the right. The product is what I get. Like, you get the product of your work when you finish something you're working on, right? So reactants react. Reactants are on the left. They're at the beginning. Then you have a yield sign, and then you have products on the right. Products are what you get. So reactants at the beginning, products at the end. So you're going to have a question on your test that's like, when you have calcium carbonate in the presence of water or sunlight or something, it can break down into such and thus and such and thus, calcium and carbon dioxide or something. What is this going to look like? And so you're going to have to know, well, it said I start with calcium carbonate, CaCO3. I'm going to put that at the reactants, and it turns into these 2 things. So I'm going to have CO2 plus Ca or whatever. You're going to have to work out in your head what starts goes on the left and what it ends with goes on the right, which from reading left to right, when we read English, we should already have an idea that like what we start with goes over here. Well, I might be backwards on the video, but what we start with goes over here and what we end with goes over here, right? Okay, so that's that. On that, we will go over more examples in class. And then I just wanted to touch on these 2 images. I've mentioned this many times this year. The number 1 element, and we're going to make a little booklet about this. The number 1 element in the Earth's atmosphere is nitrogen. Nitrogen. People think of air as being oxygen because we breathe oxygen, but that's not the case. It's mostly nitrogen. Oxygen is next, but nitrogen is 78% of the atmosphere. Nitrogen. Okay? That's the atmosphere, or the gas around the Earth, the air that you're breathing and living in right now. The crust of the Earth, the water in the ocean, and all living things are mostly oxygen. Now you might be like, but Miss Wilson, it's H2O. We know humans are mostly H2O. It's H2, there's more H's. Because that's a thought that I had. But think about where H is on the periodic table. It's first, and it's extremely light, right? It has 1 little proton. Oxygen is number 8. It has 8 protons. So it's 8 times as heavy as hydrogen. So even though there's 2 H's for every O, when we're talking about these, it's still going to be overwhelmingly oxygen by mass, because oxygen is just more stuff and H is so tiny. So in terms of the ocean, living things, and the crust, because also in the crust it's made of a lot of compounds. You've seen a lot of compounds that all have O's, like H2SO4, right? PHO4, like those things. A lot of them have O's. These are rocks. A lot of rocks have a lot of oxygen in them, which is weird to think about because you associate oxygen with air, but it's actually an element that's in a lot of different things, not just air. Okay, so Again, living things like you, water in the ocean, and the crust of the earth are all, we're going to say, mostly oxygen because we're going by mass. And the atmosphere is mostly nitrogen. And a chemical equation has what you start with called reactants on the left, a yield sign in the middle, that's an arrow, and then products on the right, which is what you end up with. That is all. I just wanted to touch on these because I felt like we glossed over them. All right, I'm going to hit my end button, and I hope you have good studying. Bye.